Be me, Judith, tenured professor at a major research university. Have spent 2 decades building my career on examining power structures and oppression. Not going to lie, pretty much considered one of the leading voices in academic circles on gender inequality. My lecture hall is packed every semester, students hanging on every word. Today's topic: systemic discrimination against women in institutional settings. The family court system, I tell my class, represents one of the final frontiers where we need to examine how patriarchal structures continue to disadvantage women. Notice one of the guys in the 3rd row, Jack, shifting uncomfortably. He's raised his hand 3 times this semester with "but what about" questions. I can already feel the eye roll coming. "Yes, Jack," I say, not quite hiding my exasperation. "Professor Judith, I was wondering, my uncle went through a divorce last year, and he barely gets to see his kids, even though he's a great dad. Don't men sometimes face?" "Jack," I interrupt, keeping my voice measured but firm, "anecdotal evidence isn't data. What you're describing is selection bias. One case doesn't override the systematic patterns we observe in how institutions treat women." Several students nod approvingly. Jack looks like he wants to say more, but backs down. Good, we can move forward with actual academic discussion. After class, I'm walking back to my office with my colleague Cameron from the sociology department. "You were a bit harsh on that kid," Cameron mentions. I stop walking and turn to face him. "Cameron, if I don't challenge these narratives, who will? These young men come in here thinking that just because they heard about one father's rights case, suddenly the entire system is oppressing men. I'm just saying, maybe there's room for nuance." "Nuance!" I actually laugh. "Cameron, I've been studying these systems for 20 years. I've read thousands of pages of research. The data consistently shows that women are disadvantaged in divorce proceedings, child support enforcement, domestic violence cases. This isn't up for debate." Cameron just shrugs and heads to his office. Honestly, sometimes I wonder how people get tenure. Back at my desk, I'm reviewing my latest grant proposal. Massive 5-year study examining family court outcomes across multiple jurisdictions. The goal: finally compile comprehensive, irrefutable evidence of how family courts discriminate against women. Going to look at custody decisions, financial settlements, parenting time allocations, everything. Been waiting my whole career to do something this definitive. The University Review Board approved it last month. $800,000 in funding. Going to publish something that becomes required reading in every family law course in the country. 3 months into the research, I've got a team of 4 research assistants. We're pulling data from family court records in 7 different states. Thousands of cases. Every custody hearing, every divorce settlement, every modification request from the past decade. I've designed the methodology myself. Triple-blind coding to eliminate bias. Statistical controls for income, education, work schedules, prior involvement in childcare. This is going to be airtight. No men's rights activist is going to be able to poke holes in this. My research assistant, Connor, knocks on my office door during data collection phase. "Professor Judith, I'm noticing something weird in the preliminary coding." "Weird how?" "Well, when we control for employment status and prior childcare involvement, there's this pattern where fathers are requesting joint custody at higher rates than mothers, but they're receiving it at significantly lower rates." I frown. "Connor, we're only 3 months in. Preliminary data always has noise. That's why we're doing a 5-year study with a massive sample size." "Right, but let's not draw conclusions from incomplete data. Sets. That's sloppy methodology." He nods and leaves. Honestly, I need to remember that research assistants are still learning. They see one anomalous pattern and think it means something. 6 months in, I'm presenting our progress at a faculty meeting. Outline our methodology, sample size, the rigor of our approach. "What I expect we'll find," I tell the room, "is that despite rhetoric to the contrary, Mothers continue to face judicial bias that assumes their career ambitions make them less suitable parents, while fathers are rewarded for even minimal involvement. Professor Richard from the law school raises his hand. Judith, have you built in any mechanisms to test if the opposite is true? Scientific method requires falsifiability. I give him my most patient smile. Richard, of course the methodology allows for any outcome, but we design research hypotheses based on existing literature and observed patterns. Every major study in this field has indicated maternal disadvantage. I've seen some smaller studies that suggest smaller studies with methodological flaws. I interject. That's exactly why we need this comprehensive research. Meeting moves on. 1 year into this study, I'm reviewing our first major data analysis. Sitting in my office at 9 p.m., spreadsheets open across 2 monitors. We've now got complete data from 3,400 custody cases. Fully coded, controlled for every relevant variable. I start running the statistical models, expecting to see clear patterns of maternal discrimination. The numbers start populating. Custody awarded to mother as primary parent, 68.7%. Custody awarded to father as primary parent, 11.2%. Joint physical custody, 20.1%. I stare at this for a moment. Okay, but that doesn't mean anything by itself. Everyone knows mothers get custody more often because fathers don't request custody. That's been the explanation, forever. Men just don't fight for their kids. I filter for cases where both parents requested primary custody. In contested cases where both parents sought primary physical custody, mother awarded primary custody 72.3%. Father awarded primary custody 9.8%. Split/joint custody 17.9%. I refresh the spreadsheet thinking there's an error. Numbers stay the same. Okay, but this must be because of work schedules. Fathers work longer hours, they're less available. I add controls for employment status and working hours. In cases where parents had equivalent employment situations, mother awarded primary custody 71.1%. Father awarded primary custody 10.4%. My stomach does a small flip. I close my laptop. It's late. I'm tired. I'm probably missing something. Next morning, I have Connor rerun everything. Double-check our coding, verify our controls. Numbers look consistent. Professor, he says, sliding the printout across my desk. I spend the next week looking for methodological errors. There have to be errors. Check our sampling method. It's sound. Check our coding reliability. 94% inter-rater agreement. Excellent. Check our statistical controls. Properly specified. Bring in a colleague from the statistics department to review my models. Methodology looks solid, Judith. These are robust findings. I thank her and close my office door. Sit there in silence for 20 minutes. 2 years into the study now. I've expanded the research because I need to understand this. Maybe custody isn't where the discrimination happens. Maybe it's in financial outcomes. I start analyzing child support awards, calculating support amounts relative to income, expenses, parenting time. When mothers are the non-custodial parent, average child support order, $3,200 per year. When fathers are the non-custodial parent, average child support order, $6,100 per year. I create scatter plots, run regressions, control for every variable I can think of. Income, expenses, number of children, age of children, parenting time percentage. The gap persists. Men are ordered to pay significantly more child support relative to their income and parenting time than women. I'm sitting in my office at midnight running these numbers for the 5th time. My hands are actually shaking. This can't be right. There has to be something I'm missing, some confounding variable I haven't accounted for. I expand the study again, looking at parenting time allocation now. In cases where both parents requested equal parenting time and had equivalent work schedules, mothers received equal or greater parenting time, 76.4%. Fathers received equal or greater parenting time, 23.6%. I'm analyzing judicial reasoning now, reading through hundreds of case files, judge after judge explaining why they're denying fathers' requests for equal time. Mother has been primary caregiver, even in cases where both parents worked full-time and split duties. Child needs stability of primary home, only applied when mother is seeking primary custody. Father's work schedule is incompatible, in cases where mother has identical schedule. One case, father is a teacher with summers off, mother is a consultant who travels weekly. Custody to mother, father gets every other weekend. Judge's reasoning, children need their mother. I read that line 5 times. Children need their mother. That's not bias against women. That's bias against men. That's literally textbook discrimination against fathers. I close the file and put my head in my hands. 3 years into the study, I'm at a conference presenting preliminary findings. I've titled my presentation carefully, Examining Parental Outcomes in Family Court Systems. Very neutral. I present the data as objectively as I can. Show the custody statistics, the support calculations, the parenting time allocations. During Q&A, a younger professor asks, "So your research indicates systematic bias against fathers?" The room goes quiet. Everyone knows my work, knows my perspective. The data indicates disparate outcomes for fathers in contested custody cases, I say carefully. I can feel my face getting hot. But would you characterize this as institutional discrimination against men? She presses. The numbers show a pattern that warrants further investigation. I'm dodging and I know it, and everyone in the room knows it. Back home, I can't sleep, lying in bed at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling. 20 years. 20 years I've been teaching that systems are rigged against women. I've written 3 books, dozens of papers, given hundreds of lectures, built my entire reputation on analyzing how institutions oppress women. And my own research, the most comprehensive study I've ever designed, with the most rigorous methodology I've ever employed, proves the opposite, at least in this one system. Family courts are discriminating against men, systematically, measurably, significantly. I get up and pour myself a drink even though it's 3 a.m., sit at my kitchen table with my laptop, pull up the data again like maybe it'll be different this time. It's not different. Mothers are favored in custody decisions even when fathers are equally qualified. Fathers are held to higher standards and face greater scrutiny. Judges apply different reasoning based on parent gender. Men pay more child support relative to their circumstances. Fathers get less parenting time even when they request it and can accommodate it. The numbers are clear. This is institutional discrimination. This is systematic bias. If the genders were reversed, I would call this oppression without hesitation. I think about Jack in my class, his uncle who barely sees his kids. I dismiss that as anecdotal. But what if there are thousands of cases like that? What if the plural of anecdote actually is data when you collect enough of them? What if I've been wrong? 4 years into the study, I'm supposed to be writing this up for publication. I've been stalling for months. My research team keeps asking when we're submitting. I tell them I want to be absolutely certain before we publish. Truth is, I don't know how to publish this. I don't know how to write a paper that contradicts everything I've spent my career arguing. Cameron stops by my office. How's the family court research going? It's complicated. Complicated how? I hesitate. Then I just say it. The data doesn't show what I expected. He waits. Cameron, fathers are getting screwed in family courts. Like, systematically. The numbers are undeniable. He sits down. What are you going to do? I don't know. If I publish this, do you know what happens? Every men's rights group in the country will use my research to argue that men are oppressed. My own students will question everything I've taught them. Is the research sound? It's the most methodologically rigorous study I've ever conducted. I've checked everything multiple times, had outside statisticians verify it. The findings are robust. Cameron leans back in his chair. So you have a choice between your ideology and your academic integrity. I want to argue, but he's right. That's exactly the choice. What would you tell one of your students in this situation? He asks. I know what I'd tell them. I've said it 100 times in seminars. Follow the data wherever it leads. Truth over comfort. There's your answer. He leaves, and I'm alone with my laptop again. I think about all the times I've lectured about academic honesty, about pursuing truth regardless of political implications, about how real scholarship follows evidence, not ideology. I've said those words so many times, meant them too. Never thought I'd be the one tested on it. I open a blank document and start writing the paper. It's the hardest thing I've ever written. Every sentence feels like I'm betraying something. But the data is there, clear, consistent, comprehensive. I write about custody disparities, about fathers being held to different standards, about systematic patterns of judicial bias, about how family courts favor mothers even when controlling for all relevant factors. I include every statistic, every analysis, every control. Make it impossible to dismiss. 5 months later, the paper is done. I've submitted it to the top family law journal. Peer review takes 3 months. Reviewers come back with comments. Methodology is exemplary. Findings are striking and well supported. This will be controversial, but the research is sound. They accept it for publication. I sit in my office holding the acceptance letter, should feel triumphant. This is the biggest publication of my career, most rigorous research I've ever done. Instead, I feel sick. The paper publishes 6 months later. The response is immediate. Men's rights groups are sharing it everywhere. Even feminist researchers admit family courts discriminate against fathers. Major study proves fathers' rights activists were right all time. My inbox is flooded. Half the emails are from men thanking me, telling me their stories. Fathers who haven't seen their kids in years. Men paying 60% of their income in support while working 2 jobs. Guys who were assumed to be deadbeats or abusers just because they were fathers fighting for custody. The other half are from colleagues and former allies. How could you publish this? You're giving ammunition to misogynists. This research will be used to hurt women. I'm sitting in my office reading these emails, one from a father named Mike, hasn't seen his daughter in 4 years. His ex-wife made false abuse allegations. No evidence, charges dropped, but he still lost custody. Gets supervised visitation twice a month. Pays $2,000 monthly in support. Your research is the first time I've felt like someone in academia actually saw us, he writes. I think about how I would have responded to this email 5 years ago. Would have dismissed it, would have assumed he was leaving out information, would have thought, there must be a reason he lost custody. I'm teaching my seminar next week, same class where Jack asked about his uncle. I've completely rewritten my lecture on family courts. Standing in front of the room, I pull up my research. I'm going to tell you about a study I conducted, I begin. I designed this research expecting to find discrimination against mothers in family court systems. That's what I hypothesized based on my understanding of how patriarchal structures function. The students are listening closely. They know my work, know my perspective. The data told a different story. I walk them through it. Every finding, every statistic. I watch their faces. Some look confused. Some look skeptical. Jack in the 3rd row is leaning forward, paying close attention. What this research demonstrates, I continue, is that institutional bias can operate in ways that contradict our theoretical expectations. Family courts, staffed largely by people who would consider themselves progressive and pro-equality, consistently discriminate against fathers. A student raises her hand. Professor Judith, doesn't this contradict what you've taught us about patriarchy? I take a breath. That's the question I've been wrestling with for 3 years. I'm being more honest than I've ever been in a classroom. I think what this shows is that gender-based oppression is more complex than a simple male oppressor, female victim model. Traditional gender stereotypes, women as caregivers, men as providers, get enforced by institutions in ways that can harm both genders. But you've always said, another student starts, I know what I've said, and I'm not abandoning everything I've taught you about analyzing power structures. But I am telling you that I was wrong about this particular system. Family courts discriminate against fathers. The data is unambiguous. After class, Jack approaches my desk. Professor, I just wanted to say, my uncle's been fighting for custody for 2 years now. He's a good dad, works from home, coaches Little League, the whole thing. His ex has a serious drinking problem. He still can't get more than supervised visits. I look at him, really look at him, not as an annoying student with "what about men?" questions, as someone trying to tell me about a real injustice he's witnessed. I'm sorry I dismissed you when you brought this up before, I say. He looks surprised. I thought I knew what the data would show before I actually looked at it. That's bad science, and I should have known better. Jack nods, doesn't gloat, just says thanks and leaves. Later that week, I'm invited to give a talk at a conference. Used to be one of their regular keynote speakers. This time, they've asked me to participate in a panel on my family courts research. When I arrive, I see who else is on the panel. Robert, a father's rights attorney I've publicly criticized in the past, called his work regressive in a published review. He sees me and nods. I nod back. During the panel, he presents data from his casework, patterns that match exactly what I found in my research. When it's my turn, I acknowledge this. Robert's observations from his legal practice align with what we found in our systematic review of court data. I owe him an apology for dismissing his work without properly examining the evidence he was presenting. The moderator looks shocked. Robert looks shocked. Honestly, I'm a bit shocked at myself. But it's true. He was right, and I was wrong. After the panel, Robert and I end up talking. That took guts, he says, publishing research that contradicts your previous positions. It took 5 years of denial. First, I admit, but you published it. A lot of people wouldn't have. We talk about the data, about patterns he's seeing in current cases. He's not a monster or a misogynist, just a lawyer who noticed his clients were facing systematic bias and decided to do something about it. And I called him regressive for it. Back at the university, things have shifted. Some colleagues won't talk to me. Others have quietly said they respect the research, even if they're uncomfortable with the implications. My class enrollment is down. Some students dropped when they heard I was sympathizing with men's rights activists. Others enrolled specifically because they want to hear about the research. I'm sitting in my office one evening, looking at my bookshelf. 3 books I've authored about gender oppression, dozens of papers, 20 years of work. It's not all wrong. Women do face discrimination in many systems. Wage gaps, harassment, reproductive rights, violence. That's all still real. But I was so convinced that women were oppressed in every system that I couldn't see where men were getting screwed. Couldn't see it even when students like Jack were telling me about it. Couldn't see it until my own rigorous methodology forced me to look. My phone buzzes. Email from a colleague at another university. She's designing a study on sentencing disparities in criminal courts. After reading your family courts paper, I started wondering if we'd see similar gender patterns in criminal justice, she writes. My preliminary data shows men receive 63% longer sentences than women for the same crimes with the same criminal history. Would you be interested in collaborating? I stare at this email. Part of me wants to delete it, wants to go back to when things were simpler, when I knew who the oppressors were and who the oppressed were, when I could walk into a classroom and speak with complete certainty. But that certainty was based on not looking too closely at data that contradicted my beliefs, based on dismissing people who tried to tell me about injustices I didn't want to see. I hit reply. Yes, I'd be very interested in collaborating. Let's set up a call to discuss methodology, because this is what being a real scholar means. Following evidence even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Admitting when you're wrong. I think about how insufferable I must have been, how certain I was, how dismissive of anyone who questioned my framework. Jack and his uncle. Cameron trying to suggest nuance. Robert's legal work that I trashed without really examining. All those fathers who tried to tell their stories and got labeled as whiners or liars. I was so sure I had it all figured out. So convinced of my own righteousness. My research didn't just prove that family courts discriminate against fathers. It proved that I'd been intellectually arrogant, that I'd let ideology override evidence, that I'd failed at the most basic requirement of honest scholarship. The irony is pretty brutal when I think about it. I designed this study to prove men wrong, to shut down fathers' rights advocates with hard data. Instead, I proved them right. With my own rigorous, careful, methodologically sound research. I proved exactly what I'd spent years denying. There's a certain poetic justice in that. Getting hoisted by my own petard, trapped by my own academic standards. I'm teaching a different kind of course now, still examining power and oppression, but with more humility, more willingness to look at complexity. Yesterday, a student asked if systems could oppress different genders in different contexts. I said yes, said that's exactly what the evidence shows, said we have to be willing to see oppression wherever it exists, not just where our theories predict it. Some of my former allies think I've betrayed the cause. Some men's rights activists think I've seen the light. Honestly, I don't think either is quite right. I just finally started doing what I always claimed to do, following the evidence. It just took my own comprehensive research study proving me completely wrong to make me do it. Sitting here now, looking at citation counts for my family courts paper, it's being cited more than anything else I've written. Becoming required reading in law schools, being used in custody cases across the country. Fathers' attorneys are citing my research to challenge judicial bias. Some courts are actually changing their practices because of it. This paper is going to have more real-world impact than 20 years of my previous work combined. And it's the paper I never wanted to write. The research that contradicted everything I believed. The data that shocked me so much I spent 3 years in denial. I guess that's the thing about truth. It doesn't care about your ideology, doesn't care about your career, doesn't care about your certainty. It just is. And if you're actually committed to finding it, sometimes it finds you, even when you really, really wish it hadn't.